top of the tent. So it just gives you an idea. This pike is about 8-9 feet long, but the typical pike used in the period would have been about 16 to 25 feet long. The other weapon Frank's using here is called a halberd. This particular one is one I based on a German version, and these would have been seen in Ireland from about the 15th century up. And basically what it is, it's a multi-purpose dual weapon. You've got a beak on the back, you've got a spike on the top, and you've got an axe on the front. And what the beak's for is basically, as a man on a horse passes you, what you'll do is you'll reach out, you'll grab his reins with that beak with dismounting from the horse. What you must consider is that the fastest thing on earth at the time is a man on a horse. He's your heavy armour of the period, and he's only vulnerable when he's on the ground. What I'm wearing is actually more European in style. For those of you that know anything about the Lagan Army, or most of the armies, the Irish troops in Ireland in the 1640s and 50s, is that predominantly the Irish officer corps were coming out of Spain, and they were fighting in the 80 Years' War on the Spanish Flanders. But also the Stuart brothers themselves, that would have been part of would have started up the Lagan Army, would also have fought in the Flanders and Germany and places like that in the 30 Years' War. And so their dress would also be typically like this, which is more European in style, with your lace, your gloves, basically a short coat. Now, when you look at the paintings of the period, you'll see that these guys are wearing very, very fancy clothes, silk and all of that kind of stuff. They wouldn't use that type of clothing when they're fighting. They'd be using basic gear that's comfortable to wear and is functional. So, this would be your levy or your normal soldier, and what I'd be wearing would be sergeant or officer clothing and style. So we put this down now. Now, what I will say to the children and everybody else is that most of these weapons are what they call half-live, which means they're not fully sharp, but they're sharp enough to do significant damage if you're not careful around them. So we would ask that when we're standing around, or we have any of these weapons, that no children touch, or any adults touch the equipment. What Frank's going to put on now is going to put on a thing called a bandolier, and he's going to do a demonstration of the firing process from the wars of the Three Kingdoms. In his right hand he has a musket, and in his left hand he has a musket rest. Right, your match.
Where's the blade hole?
Okay, so he's going to start, and the first thing he does is he's going to put powder into the musket. So on the bandolier you have 12 small bottles, and each one of those bottles holds one charge of powder. Now there were generally 12 of these, because there's 12. What makes up a pound? Anybody know? 12 what? And a pound?
14 ounces.
14, sorry.
16 ounces.
Sorry, I'm using the French system here. That's my excuse for this. Okay. But anyway, you have the 12 bottles contain 1 pound of powder. That's what they contain.
16, 14 pounds of stone.
But the 12 bottles together are 1 pound of powder. Each man is issued 1 pound of powder, and then he may have a second pound somewhere on his person. And each one of these little bottles contains 1 charge. What he will do is he will pour the powder from the little bottle, which they call an apostle, into the barrel. That powder falls down to the back of the barrel, and what he will do then is he will go to there's a little bag on the belt called a ball to sack. He will then take a lead ball from that, like so, and he will drop it into the barrel. He will then grab maybe a piece of sod, or he might have a little bit of cloth, and what he will do is he will put that in then, and he will take what they call the scouring stick, and he'll ram that charge down to the bottom of the barrel. He'll give it 3 good thrusts, and then what he'll do is he'll return the scouring stick to the back of the barn. Now the thing about this is that if you don't have a scouring stick for your musket, it's useless. And this is one of the reasons it was such a serious military offence to actually discharge your scouring stick when you were firing the musket. What Frank will do now is he will prime the weapon, and on the side of the barrel there's a small pan, and on the side of the pan is a small hole into the barrel. He will load in a small amount of powder into that. He will then close the pan cover. He'll blow off and shake off the loose corns of powder. He will then take his match and he'll place the match in the serpentine. And on the top of the pan there's a small plate, and on the plate is a small X. And what the soldier will do is he will line up, he will test to make sure that the match is touching that X. When he's satisfied that that's done, he'll get the command to present, and what he will do is he will place the musket on the rest. This gives him a stable platform for firing. Anybody that shoots will know that you need.
It's pointing at.
Yeah, that's okay. That's part of it.
Shoot the both of them, Thomas.
We'll pick up the check from his wife later on. Okay. Anybody that shoots will know that you need 3 points of contact with terra firma to get a good stable shot. So he has his 3 points of contact now with the musket rest at his 2 feet. Present. So when he presents, he will then open the pan and he will squeeze the trigger. Bang.
Bye, Boyd.
What happens is basically that match is actually lit, and it's lit on both ends. And the soldiers carry the match like so. Both ends are lit, and when you fire the musket, the end that goes into the pan will actually be extinguished from the blast. This is why both ends are lit. He will then relight that end of the match. He holds the match cord like so, and the reason for that is that he only needs his thumb and index finger, and he holds the rest of the match in what they call the insignificant fingers. You can lose all those other 3 fingers, but you do need the index finger and thumb to fire, otherwise you're no good as a soldier. Basically, there are 36 actual movements to loading a musket in the period. But what they found in Ireland, even back as far as the 9 Years' War, was that the actual musket stand itself was more of a hindrance than a help. So later on, after the secession of arms in 1644, where the Confederate troops, the Scots, the parliamentarians and the royalists decided to have a cessation of arms for 2 years. In this interim period, they started to try and cut down the cost of producing weapons and trying to basically streamline military tactics. So when hostilities open up in 1645 again, the soldier has now discarded the musket stand altogether, and he's just there with a musket. Now we'll notice that when Frank was using the stand, he held the musket under the arm. Now the soldier's starting to use his shoulder as that 3rd point of contact to fire, and you will find that is a much faster system. Also, we have a number of other things to show you. Has anybody ever seen one of these? Have you ever seen anything like it? Similar to it? None of you wear kilts, no? None of you wear your e-skin do, no?
Thank you. Aye. Yeah, thanks.
That's it. Look at his. Come on up here and show me. Come on up here a second. Please see this. What's your skin do? Hope he's in a sense of humour. You see, in Ireland where they wear trousers, they have a skin like that. In Scotland where they wear kilts, the cold weather gives you a skin like that. So, basically what this is a skin. A skin is basically the Gaelic word for knife. And this is an Irish fighting knife. Now you did have these in Scotland as well, because the connection between Scotland and this part of Ireland is goes past things like temporal and ecclesiastical ideologies, right? So you have a connection from day dot between both communities. As Stevenson says, Ireland and Scotland are but both sides of the same lake, basically. So what he's basically inferring is that the technology and ideas and all are basically the same. So this is an Irish fighting knife, and they basically would throw these, and they are very, very effective. And there are actually accounts, and especially in the 9 Years' War, of Irish soldiers actually basically cutting through the leatherwork and the arming coats of English troops in this part of the country with these. The weapon is quite narrow. The point slightly, it turns up slightly, and if we can get if you put that down a second. Just going to put this microphone down. The weak point of a soldier with armour is his armour itself, if you can get close enough to him. So even today in the military, if you have a helmet on, especially in close quarter fighting, CQB, it can become a liability. So basically what you want to do is you want a lightly armed, lightly dressed man. If he's in against somebody with armour, then the guy in armours can be in jeopardy. So I can grab him here on the leatherwork, or if I can get in behind him and get his head down. Once you get a man by a helmet and it's strapped, he can't go anywhere. Can you move, Frank? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a vulnerable point on the guy. Now this is the beauty about this particular knife, and a very, very effective weapon. I can get him in through the top of the shoulder, and that's going to go into his lungs and into his heart. If he's wearing armour that covers his body and I can get him down, I can just jam him with it, right? And that is why this weapon is designed in the way that it is. The English had, sorry Frank, you okay?
Frank,
the English had a thing called a bollock knife, right? It's called, it has that name because that's where your vulnerable point is anywhere you have articulations in the armour or anywhere you have gaps for movement. And this is one of the reasons at this period that you start to see armour disappear. You'll notice that I'm wearing a metal collar. It's called a gorget. Anybody knows anything about British Army uniforms or a lot of royal regiments, they still wear like a little crescent, gold brass crescent, and that comes from this. And basically what this is for is this is to protect that vulnerable point in your collarbone down into the chest cavity. And even in this period that we're wearing these because of things like this. Sorry, Frank. Anybody know what this is? Shield. It's a shield. It's called a targe, is the proper name for it. And this is where the English get the name target from. Target men. And these are lightly armed. Could be lightly armed or heavily armed men. And what they're going to do is they're going to come in close, and they're going to use something like a stabbing weapon or a short spear or something like that. And in the Battle of Culloden, these were very effective. Now this is a slightly earlier one, and the Targes and Scots warfare actually comes from Ireland. This is where they begin. But in the 14th century, I can't remember his name. One of the kings of Scotland actually laid out a regulation of how targes were to be made. The reason that you know this particular one is a slightly earlier one from the Wars of the Three Kingdoms and before is that in the 1745 rebellion in Scotland, or the Williamite War as well in Scotland, what the Scots Highland troops would do is if they killed an English soldier, what they would do is they would take a trophy. So what they had was they had these little, what they call bosses, which are brass cones, and they would actually take a piece of the red material from the dead man, and they would actually place it on the boss, and then they would take a second one and they would put it over the top. So you have all these beautifully decorated Scots shields, and each one of those bosses on those shields represents one man that they have killed. And you have some of them, and they're just literally covered in red, and they're an absolutely very, very, very effective weapon, considering that it's only wood and leather. But I mean, if you, what I'll do is I'll pass the charge around now in a little minute, but I mean, if you imagine that you're coming in against somebody with one of these on him, carrying one of these, and I mean, you know, you're covered underneath and you're covered over the top, and if you get a crack in the head with one of these, it'll ring your bell. So I'll pass that around. You can have a look at that.